We talked about so many things that I think are applicable that I wish I had heard when I was a kid. Make mistakes is probably one of the biggest ones. Learning from your mistakes is a big one. But I think making mistakes correlates to like challenging yourself to think about doing something that is a little bit beyond your reach. And so you try it out, you know what it feels like, and know what to do better the next time.
Hey everyone, this is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to another exciting episode of Artists Decoded. And in this episode, I get the opportunity to talk to director Joe Sill. I met Joe just a few weeks ago on set for a commercial he was directing. Immediately, I just felt his energy, and he just exudes such a positive energy, and it was really easy to talk to him. When we were talking, he was telling me about his first feature film entitled Stray that was coming out on March 1st. So I was fortunate enough to attend the screening of his sci-fi neo-noir film, which was really incredible, and you should definitely go check it out if you can. It's playing in select theaters right now. So a little bit about Joe. He began studying film at the age of 12 and spent much of his youth learning how to use a camera and how to craft visual effects. And in 2009, he attended Chapman University to study directing full-time. In 2013, he created a spec commercial for Tesla that gained Elon Musk's attention and support. This particular spec jumpstarted his commercial career, where he started to shoot for commercial clients such as Apple, Nike, NASA, Disney, and Warner Brothers, to name a few. So in this episode, we kind of nerd out on a bunch of different films that we've both watched. We talk about Akira, the whole Alien series, Batman Begins, Ghost in the Shell, and a bunch of different other films that we talk about in this episode. We also talk about one of my favorite video games called The Last of Us, which came out in 2013, I believe. And we kind of nerd out about that, and we interdisperse that conversation with a bunch of different film talk. We also talk about his love for MIYAVI films, and we touch a bit about an idea of artificial intelligence, which for some reason comes up a lot on this podcast, recently been in my consciousness for some particular reason or another. But before we begin the episode, if you haven't yet, please go to our iTunes page and leave us a review. It helps for viewers just like yourself to hear about the podcast. So here it is, my conversation with director Joe Sill, talking about his film Stray on Artists Decoded. Hope you enjoy. Well, thanks so much for coming and being a part of Artists Decoded, man. I really do appreciate it. I guess, why don't we start from the top, and where did your interest in film come from?
I think, I try to find a distilled version of why do I do the things that I do. But I think I can trace film back to just given that I was always feeling I was on the outside, so to speak. I think film was a second home for me, because I already liked art, I already liked music. Film was just a lateral transition for both of those topics. And so I always kind of felt at home when I was watching movies and kind of getting to live in the movies, live in the behind the scenes afterwards and the featurettes and all the stories that they would tell that make you relate and identify and feel like you understood these people in the film as well as the people making the films. And I think also particularly I responded to very escapist movies, I think because I was looking for an escape from, feeling like an outcast or feeling like an outsider. I was looking to, fantasy movies. Star Wars was a fantasy movie that I could dive into and live in that world. Or, I think Spielberg movies were about very outcast type main characters and heroes, but they were incredibly idealistic and heroic because they were idealistic, and I could identify with that. And then also just anything that was period piece or science fiction that was, a gritty future that, James Cameron or Ridley Scott would make, like it was really cool to like watch a movie like that and dive into, a completely unrealistic world and then find realistic characters.
Yeah.
I didn't find much interest in like films that felt like real life just because it would remind me already of living in real life. And so I found myself even in books. Lord of the Rings was one of my favorite books just because it was so, it gave you the opportunity to escape.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of James Cameron, well, also Ridley Scott, but which alien film do you like the best? Oh, and let's not forget David Fincher.
Yeah, he's in that that crew.
That trifecta.
Yeah, it's tough because I think I relate to James Cameron's Aliens more than an Alien, Ridley Scott, solely because I think it felt more adventurous. I think it was more fun to it. I think Alien felt like a very claustrophobic nightmare, and I think as escapist as it was, what's up?
Oh no! I think that was exactly their intention.
Yeah, no, and you feel it, and I felt more stressed out watching it than I felt excited, and
I personally love those. I don't know why, but I personally love those sort of feelings when I watch a film.
Well, it just gets your blood going. It's real because you feel it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you would say Alien is your guy, maybe.
Well, what I was just thinking about, speaking of James Cameron, is there's an interesting juxtaposition between Alien and Aliens as there is between Terminator 1 and Terminator 2.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
It's kind of like the same trajectory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the same trajectory, and they're both like incredible films. I was just thinking about that recently about, I was thinking about it recently because I didn't watch the whole thing, but I've seen it before, Terminator Salvation.
Oh man. Yeah.
And then I was thinking of just how good Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 are.
Right.
But so yes, I think I like Alien more than Aliens.
Yeah.
For that reason, but I think I like Terminator 2 for the entertainment reason why it seems like you would like Aliens.
Yeah, I think Aliens did something different with the I think this is why I actually relate to Aliens more is that they introduced the surrogate mother-daughter relationship in Aliens, which I think they also played into with Terminator 2, which was the surrogate father-son relationship, the mother and child relationship. And I think for me, I have always, I'm not going to say I love family dramas because that's, not the right connotation, but like I've always loved stories that have to do with parental-child relationships. And I think that also tracks back to me being an only child. My parents were my, closest and strongest tie to family. So I think, I think I relate most deeply to a parental-child relationship and the struggles that they go through. Yeah. So I don't know, seeing Ripley, want to go to the depths to like protect this child, struck a chord in me, I think.
Yeah, that's a very interesting segue to your film Stray.
Yeah.
The surrogate
it does,
daughter-mother relationship that exists within that film.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit? And actually maybe talk about the beginning of your thought process and wanting to make that film as your first film.
Yeah, I think I'm only starting to unpack why I connect to certain types of stories or certain type of character relationships more. I think when I pitched Stray, it was a lot more subconscious that I wanted to do parental-child bonding, which I think is what happens in Stray with, Murphy and Nori after Nori loses her mother. But I think going back into all my other previous films, as well as short films, they all seem to have that relationship. I made a short film about a soldier in World War II who couldn't live up to his dad's expectations as a concert pianist. So he went to war and ends up finding this lost German boy who ends up being the son of a Nazi general. There were deep correlations of I think what I was going through with being a teenager with living up to my own dad's expectations. And that was what that short film was about, I think. I made a short about a mother who went to the moon to work at a lunar mining facility so that she could raise enough funds for her dying daughter. And, that was, again, another, parental child relationship story. And I think they were all subconscious. I'm just starting to pick up that I really respond to that.
Yeah.
And so I think with Stray, I found that the unlikely pair would be a cop or a detective in a noir story that was finding herself unlikely or strangely bonding to this girl who had just gone through incredible trauma, losing her parent. And this girl just so happens to be kind of a force conscious young woman, kind of towing the line between a Star Wars character and a anime character, I guess. Inspiration from both of them, which ironically seem to be correlated. So
yeah, I think it's interesting to be able to connect different works that you've done. And I mean, you're talking about now that you're reflecting on these things that you've created, and now you're dissecting certain meanings and how that evokes certain meanings from like your experiences in your life, which is why you would potentially want to create them. But what is your writing process like? Do you start from a visual standpoint first, or is it more from the storytelling standpoint?
I think it varies. Shorts are a lot easier to unpack because typically it's like an emotion that you want to convey, a single emotion. For me, at least, a couple of the shorts that I've done, like I see like one moment where like a character's having like a catharsis, and like I'm like, okay, everything's got to drive to that one moment. I think like the Stray was a lot more difficult than that because it was unpacking a lot more characters. I'd never done a feature before, and I worked with these two writers who I know well, and like they had already had some feature experience both in direction as well as writing and producing. And so, I think there was a large learning curve for me of, okay, what is the one thing that is driving me through this whole process, because it's going to shape shift and twist and turn. I think Stray, to begin with, I think was, my producer who had came up to me in a rather unconventional way. He, had a set budget already to fill a slate of directors, and he had, approached me with, hey, I want to make a movie with you. I would like to make this movie for $500,000. What would you like to make? And I hadn't thought about what I would want to make, because I think, it was my first opportunity to make something with a tangible budget on a feature length level. But I was always thinking of these grand escapist ideas of, big, odysseys in outer space, or, underwater, or, in a recent past or a distant future.
Yeah.
So I think I realized, well, I'd like to accomplish something that has a level of magical realism, but I think I can ground it in reality so I can shoot it practically and make it for that budget.
Yeah.
And I can't think small, I guess. So I inevitably made it a little bit bigger than it probably should have been.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't feel necessarily appropriate for the budget. Like I think there ended up being about 400 visual effects shots in the film, which I ended up doing quite a bit myself just to afford the budget. But so when he asked me to think of something, he kind of guided my attention a little bit by saying, hey, I think I've noticed that you like to play with magical realism. And so I think I naturally kind of gravitated towards something that, had a bit of a supernatural twist to it, and like had a bit of a, I guess, like a force conscious twist to it, like bit of a Star Wars influence.
Yeah.
I had been playing a game called The Last of Us at the time as well, and
we were talking about that earlier.
And now that I think back to it, like I was really struck by how they dealt with this dynamic of this kind of war torn and kind of grieving older character bonding with this younger person who is much more of an idealist but had gone through quite a bit of trauma. And
another surrogate father-daughter relationship in The Last of Us.
Yeah. And so I think that ended up guiding me a little bit into doing something here. I've always been interested in like the genre that it played in, which visually is kind of lives in a more of a noir world that I could practically shoot in downtown Los Angeles and not have to, because I'm not going to blow the money on a soundstage and build out a moon surface for $500,000. So let me try and use my resources.
And you already did that in another short.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, maybe not for $500,000, but you
right.
did. You built a soundstage out to emulate the moon.
Yeah. And so I wanted to find something that I could bring a lot of an atmosphere to the table, which just so happened to be kind of an overgrown kind of metropolis, kind of gritty city. And so I think that influenced a lot of the noir aspects of it. And I think what inevitably feels like more superhero-esque aspects of the film, I think we're guided by, I think, a love for Star Wars and a love for certain anime that took these characters and gave them some, TK or, like superpowers that were, subtle, but they were still there. And I think, myself and the writers, we found ourselves really interested in, okay, what kind of powers could be emotionally driven? And I think we tried to find in the two characters that do have a strange connection. One does represent more of an idealistic perspective of growth, and one represents a really abused perspective of decay and destruction.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to understand too is just your process in general, because I mean, just looking at your commercial background and you're doing these spec commercials, and then it's kind of informing like the next process and the next process. I think some people create on a more like calculated sort of strategic pace, or some people kind of evolve with the process and like let certain things, like maybe just like you were saying, your producer kind of noticed something within you and noticed that you like to exist within this world of, I think you said magical realism.
Yeah.
Is that the term you use?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, and also, you were talking about this new living situation that you're going to be moving into, and, and having certain people around you to be able to, I mean, yes, they're your friends, but, you're honing in to these things that help you create in a way.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm definitely creating for an audience always, or at least I think I'm trying to, because I think, when I was in high school, I mean, I was making films to share with people so that I could, share something with them that they could relate to, or they could get excited about, that I was also excited about. So, in high school, I was making shorts that was a spin-off of Indiana Jones or a spin-off of The Dark Knight, because I loved those films, and I knew the audience of the school itself could relate. And so I think I'm always tending to make stuff that feels a little bit more exciting from an entertainment value perspective. But when I try to put in myself into it, it definitely gravitates emotionally towards a familial aspect, I think, because that's what I relate to.
When did you start writing this film?
We started in about April of 2016. We shot December of 2016. So it would be about 2 years now. And we finished post about middle of 2018. So it was a long post process.
Yeah. I'm really curious because about the visual effects. So not specifically just in this film, but just your trajectory into visual effects in general. So what made you become interested in doing visual effects? Because doing visual effects is a highly technical, laborious sort of process, Not a lot of directors know how to do visual effects. Not even, I mean, there's some directors that don't even do their own editing.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of when I got into film, I was very young. I think I was 13 years old, and I found it was like it was a way to kind of capture my own voice and pocket it into this little box. And I grew up in a DIY generation, as I'm sure you did as well, like, and many of us in this this age bracket. I think I had my family's camcorder to play around with when I was a kid. And so I had that, and then I would go to the school library to learn Photoshop and editing and use the computers there. And I would shoot with my friends, after school, just little tiny scripts. And typically they were always little like samurai fight scenes or like, I eventually learned, because I wanted to, how to Photoshop onto those samurai swords frame by frame on Photoshop to turn them into lightsabers, because I thought, oh, this could be cool to show to my friends, And so I think that was what got me into spending a lot of time online on the internet, learning tutorials so I could learn visual effects, so I could, I could share some cool stuff with my friends, share some, magic tricks and impress my friends. And I think, I think visual effects inevitably, they were a part of all those escapist types of stories I wanted to play into anyways. Like if it was sci-fi or fantasy or period, like you would have to use visual effects to like create stuff that didn't exist or wasn't real, So I think as I was starting to put it all together and edit my films, shoot the films, and eventually starting to learn to do visual effects, like I was just naturally starting to make stuff that I had to do all those things because the stuff that I wanted to pull off kind of required that. So,
But how much of that do you think is from just a curiosity, like you wanting to get into visual effects in the beginning? How much of that is a curiosity for just understanding the way that everything worked within film?
I just wanted to know everything, and like, I think I watched a lot of BTS from things like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and I saw what these big teams were doing, and I was like, I want to know how they put this landscape in the background. Like I want to know how they put, they turned this human actor into a robot. How they took, eventually motion capture, turned a human actor into a creature or a monster. I think that was the fascinating magic behind movies that I was pretty eager. I don't know. I was desperate to know how that worked, because I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to see what my potential for kind of crafting these worlds to life could be, so I needed to know.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about film a lot of this time, but what would you say are your favorite films?
Okay. So I would say,
I know it's a really hard question, so you can take your time.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's why I said favorite films.
Yeah. Because I mean, one movie, I can't do it. I loved the last Lord of the Rings movie. I think a lot of people relate to the first one quite a bit, but I think I responded most to the last one because I think it required the most out of the characters, and it had the most stakes, and it was the most climactic and the most grand, I think, in scope. And so I thought it also just like dealt with such a large, vast landscape in a really emotional way. So I love Lord of the Rings so much. On the flip side, I also love Road to Perdition as well, which is not a science fiction movie or a fantasy movie at all, but it is a period piece. So it was deeply escapist for the viewers. But I relate to that one. Tom Hanks is a hitman. He's trying to take care of his son because his whole family's been, taken out by his boss's son. And I think I responded to that the same way that I responded to The Last of Us, because it was at the end of the day, even though it was like a hitman noir set in a period, it was about a father trying to protect his child and what he'll go through to do that, and the moral questions that he asks himself and what the kid is asking himself as he learns that his dad is a hitman. And so I responded to that as one of my, I'll always think of that when I think of like favorite movies. But I also think of Pan's Labyrinth as well, which is a fantasy. Which
Pan's Labyrinth is awesome.
Yeah, and it just is so wildly imaginative, and it was the first time I was introduced to color being used in film. Just the way that the way that he used color to communicate emotion, you know, like when it was blue or when it was orange or when it was green, you know, like all the scenes paint different palettes that were really striking.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen Pan's Labyrinth, but I remember liking that film.
It's so good.
Yeah. What about animes?
I mean, and so I think, you know, I responded to, I love Akira, you know, so much. And I love how just kind of angsty it was, you know, because I used to be an angsty teen. You know, Akira definitely captured that kind of angstiness.
For sure.
In a really like, they used the superpowers to capture teenage angst. And I also loved every Miyazaki movies because I think they captured like a kid's sense of wonder, of
course.
You know, and for me being just like only kid in his head all the time, like that was such a pure encapsulation of that as well.
One of my favorite Miyazaki films is Spirited Away.
Oh yeah.
Just love that movie.
And Princess Mononoke too.
Yeah, like, Princess Mononoke. That one's really good. Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about Ghost in the Shell? Were you a fan?
I was a fan of the anime. I struggled with the movie, the live action movie. I think, you know, Ghost in the Shell dealt with, so funny we were talking about the city earlier. I think it dealt with creating a character in the city in such a unique way. Like I think it spent like a 7-minute montage of just cityscape and just, you know, looking up at the buildings and, you know, sharing a perspective of how gigantic these buildings were and creating a sense of the city was a character. You know. Yeah. No.
I liked how vastly complex that anime was. I haven't seen it in a while, but I just remember it being like so complex in terms of like just the understanding of like artificial intelligence, and also, I mean, it was, you know, came out in 1995.
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. I mean, I think a lot of films like AI was inspired by, I think a lot of what, you know, Ghost in the Shell brought to the table. I think a lot of AI films in general, you know.
Wait, are you speaking AI?
AI, the Spielberg movie.
Spielberg?
Yeah. And I think, you know, even Paprika was, I think Inception was largely inspired by as well. So you notice a lot of anime references in Hollywood live action.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it seemed like, at least with Stray, it seemed like, well, when I first watched the trailer, and I didn't watch the actual film, but I think I said something to the effect that it seemed like you use a lot of sort of like Japanese folklore or Japanese horror film references.
Yeah.
But now watching the film, it seems more, I mean, there's this sort of like, I guess going back to the fantastical realism aspect of it, but it seems like there was more of a cross-pollination with just certain anime in general, and not specifically like Japanese folklore and Japanese horror, you know.
It definitely toes the line, and I think it doesn't delve directly into horror because I think it you know, it is partly like a, you know, it has a superhuman power aspect to it, and I think like it also dealt with some like, you know, well, I don't know how much we can spoil here, but you know,
it's however much you want to spoil. Yeah. You can talk as broad stroke or as micro as you would like to.
I mean, I think, you know, petrification or the way that I guess people were connected to the earth was a lot, you know, that was like the closest we dealt with like horror elements, but like trying to still keep it fantastical, you know, and not necessarily like body horror per se.
Yeah.
So
are you into that sort of body horror sort of side of Japanese cinema?
I mean, I think it depends. I think like give me a reference.
The main, maybe not the main film, but the film that pops up into mind, or at least the director, is Takashi Miike. Ichi the Killer, Audition. Audition mainly because that was a pretty inspirational film for me back when I was like younger.
Yeah.
But
I think I definitely responded to the power-based parts of anime, like connection to the earth, you know, taking somebody's emotions and conveying that in a power. You know, I think that So I think me and horror have been, I haven't really delved into it that much, and I don't know why. Like, I think I just haven't found the right in yet, so to speak.
But were you exposed to a lot of horror films when you were young?
I watched The Exorcist, the original, when I was about 11 years old. I don't know why I did that.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to just say that I had done it, but I watched the first half of the movie, I turned it off, and then I didn't watch the second half for about a year, because it was way too traumatizing as a kid. But but I definitely liked the thrill of it, because it just, I don't know, I think somebody said it where like you watch horror and like it's like you watch horror so you can have like the thrill of death, but not actually experience death, so to speak. Yeah. Like you can feel like you're in danger, but you're not actually,
Exactly. Yeah.
So I find that fascinating, but,
well, I also find it fascinating the level of taste that the certain films that you watch young and then how that develops over the course of you being a creative, I find that to be really fascinating, because when I was a kid, I would watch so many horror movies, and I felt like that really played into the way that I don't really get shocked by too much stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I was just trying to, being two only children.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like what you get exposed to at a young age, and then how that affects you when you grow.
Well, I think even you bringing up like Alien versus Aliens, like I can actually, I think I can quantify why I like Aliens more as well. I think Alien stresses me the fuck out a lot. And I think, I think horror thrives on the fact that characters are powerless and they're helpless, a lot of the time, like, to this oncoming horror. And I think what Aliens did was it gave, your main character a sense of empowerment, in the face of this horrific thing.
That's interesting.
They were able to tackle this horrific thing. And I think that was, that's why I love, I think that's why I struggle with watching or creating horror that from a, I guess a conventional standpoint where the character is helpless,
for sure.
Because I think for me, I don't know, if I were an outsider character, like I would not want to be a helpless individual. I don't, I like to see that somebody overcame adversity.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about the differences between Alien and Aliens. And something that comes to mind is, we were talking about Resident Evil, and this is a parallel, is the difference between Silent Hill and Resident Evil.
Oh my God.
Because Silent Hill, you feel completely powerless. You might have like a knife or something.
You're done.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah. But at least in Resident Evil, you have ammo and you have guns.
You have a chance.
Yeah, you have a chance.
And I think I even relate to The Last of Us more, because you actually you have even more of a chance. Ellie is like capable. I mean, she is obviously like, she's infected, spoilers, but the game's been out for,
it's been out for like
for
5
fucking
years.
ever, but she has an ability to overcome the odds that were stacked against her. She was given some pretty bad cards, and she has a chance. I think I think if we want to go super meta and like maybe go way too far into that reading, I think being, from my background, I think like feeling like, culturally out of place, fiscally out of place, like you want to think that even if you're an outsider, you have a shot, at not even assimilating, but just being worthwhile. I think like, overcoming whatever kind of status quo that you've been told. So,
well, just looking at the trajectory of your career, that's really interesting that you say that, because at least from an outsider's point of view, trying to do these spec commercials to get these companies' attention, and to be able to, it's essentially what you're saying is you grew up and kind of feeling like an outsider with less of a chance, and you're essentially putting yourself in a position to learn CGI and to learn how to direct, and teaching yourself these skills to be able to give yourself a chance.
that's, yeah. I mean, I think,
because you have to creatively problem solve along the way to figure out how you can get into these sort of advantageous positions for yourself if you don't come from like money or have the upper hand, have an advantage, which could actually kind of like bite you in the ass.
You're right. Like I think people that come from a status of privilege, whatever kind of privilege that is, like I think are kind of, they're given it's a disadvantage because of comfort. If your privilege gives you comfort, then you're not really challenging yourself or challenged by others to prove yourself and to manifest something for yourself because you feel like the world is okay and you're comfortable. So,
Yeah. And I think that's also sort of a stigma for our generation, for like the millennial sort of generation is, having that sort of sense of overarching privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think, I'm just turning 28. I have more times than not, especially in the commercial industry, been mistaken for the PA on set, which is really funny and rewarding because I don't use it to gloat of, oh, I'm the director, but I recognize that I'm in a really, like you said, advantageous position at a young age, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm also, I think it took a lot of work to get there, and it took a lot of work to prove people wrong, I guess. Like you said, all the spec work was done because I wasn't given the opportunity to direct. I can name probably more projects than not where I wasn't given the opportunity to do something, so I went out and tried to make it myself so that I could get somebody's attention.
Yeah, that is a very I don't know. I mean, that's a very relatable thing for me, at least.
Yeah.
It's the creation of No Wave came from, well, kind of the punk rock version of what a gallery is.
I know you told me like you were like several different generations of punk way back in the day. Like,
oh yeah, for sure. I've always been that way, but
so that kind of like
if you
guided you.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to you in that respect. It's, if you don't have the opportunity, like if the opportunity isn't given to you, then you have to create the opportunity, and you have to, going back to the creative problem solving, you have to creatively problem solve and figure out, these are the pieces that I have on the table. Okay. How can we, put these pieces together to construct the greatest puzzle through my imagination?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, from an art gallery perspective, you have to almost like, you have to just put your flag down and say, hey, we're here, and we're going to support art, and we're going to support the art that we like. And I think that's a very like no permission asked kind of personality, right? Like you get it, you kind of just have to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Yeah.
So I get it. Like completely.
But it's pretty interesting looking at, your past, you doing the Google Glass commercial, spec commercial. That was on spec, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was like a semi-spec because my friend was working, he was working as an app developer at the time, trying to develop with Google, an app, but it was without Google's knowledge, without their permission. It was just my friend who was developing the app asked me, hey, I'm making this thing. Do you want to make something? Google had no idea. And I think, had they have known, they probably still would not have given me permission, who was still a fledgling young director just out of college, like anything. And I think the same goes for my first spec with Tesla, which was, okay. So maybe to go back to context all this. So when I was a junior in college, I started picking up on a lot of filmmakers that I looked up to had built a lot of their careers off of commercial work. Like David Fincher, Spike Jonze, Michel Gondry, like all these guys, Ridley Scott, oh my God, like that he did 3,000 commercials before doing a movie, and I learned that, like, I recognized they were learning a lot of their skill sets by doing that, and I was like, wait a second, like these guys were all onto something, like they were learning in this like lateral industry how to hone their skills as filmmakers. And I told all my friends, I think in junior year in college, and I was like, hey, maybe we should try, like I minored in advertising that day, try this commercial thing out. And all my friends were like, directors who were gunning to be auteurs, they wanted to make their first feature the year out of college, and they were like, hell no, like we're gonna go make our films, like we want to make art, not commercials, and so I kind of got laughed at for that idea, and when I graduated, I ended up working freelance. I did a lot of freelance visual effects just to, make money and to keep the lights on, to move to LA and stay in LA. And I think, and I realized pretty quickly moving out of college that nobody was going to give me a directing opportunity. Nobody was going to give me any job because my short films didn't matter to people like that were, I think the short films were cool at best and yesterday's news at worst, and so I was really struggling doing visual effects, kind of sitting in front of a computer and like doing other people's projects. And I think if I wanted to do visual effects for a living, I'd be stoked. I was doing a lot of that stuff. And, but I really like my voice just like was like yearning to get out and to express itself, like I'd craved that since I was a kid. So, it was my one outlet to express myself. So I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to try like doing a spec. I'm going to do a commercial, and I wrote this, Tesla spec with a friend, because I, thought like if I had a dream client, it'd be Tesla. They're very inspirational. They almost feel like they came out of a sci-fi movie, and
that's where the Model S spec came out.
Yeah. It just felt like a spaceship to me. It reminded me, I used to like when I was a kid, I used to like sit in my parents' car in the garage and, imagine I was in a spaceship myself. And so when I sat in the Tesla for the first time, in a pop-up shop, I was like, holy shit, this is like a spaceship. So I wanted to capture that, made the spec with some friends. And then, I think the opportunity, I wanted to make it for, that company and not another company that was making an electric car or a hybrid car because, I recognized that there was no advertising for Tesla at the time, and they had shunned advertising. So I saw like an opening in the market for like where a spec could breathe, and try and capture people's attention, if I had done it for like, the Nissan Leaf or the Chevy Volt, like, nobody would have watched it. Like nobody would have cared.
Exactly.
So like,
I think that's a perfect way to, figure out and learn the craft and understand like what your voice is about, and it gives you time, and it also gives you resources monetarily to be able to,
oh my God.
Yeah. To be able, well, first of all, to make connections monetarily, to pay for your life.
Yeah.
And there's, as people would say, 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Right. But
no, for real. And I think like, I don't know, I think I recognize like, especially in like the narrative film industry, like people that are dealing with money are dealing with a lot of stakes. They have to guarantee the return of their money, when they're going to give, especially a younger filmmaker, money. So I think like if you can prove that you can responsibly use money to produce something that is still creative, if you do it in the commercial industry, so you can prove you can work with money in the narrative industry, then so be it. You know what I mean? I also came from the background of doing everything I could without money too. So like, I think when I did Stray, it was like, okay, we have this money. Like, what can we do with it? Not like we have all the money in the world. What movie could I possibly want to make? It wasn't, those opportunities are fair and few between.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. It's a sort of, I guess you would call it a creative resourcefulness. A film that's $500,000 is not a huge budget to work with for a feature. It's usually, I don't know, upwards of at least $1 million.
At least, yeah. And that's still like a low budget kind of indie,
and
considerably.
It's generally not visually effects heavy film.
Yeah, I spoke with an actress about the film, and they had considered that the film might be $5 to $10 million because of all the fantastical nature of it. And, I was like respectfully, like I'd love that money, but I'm a first time filmmaker, so, and they were like, are you sure you're going to make this? Like, I like you, I like your work, but like, are you sure this is enough? And I was like, well, these are the cards that, I've been dealt, and I'm very fortunate for them, so I'm going to make the most out of it.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah. I think you have limitations and you create within the box and then try to make, you actually, I don't know, you find more creative ways to do things.
Exactly.
When you have to.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I've always related to those stories such as, Robert Rodriguez, El Mariachi.
Man with the camera. Yeah. $7,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then he just made Alita.
Yeah.
This huge movie.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think you do have to, you can just kind of sit there and, just kind of weep for a while, or you can, hit the road and try to figure out how to do what you can with whatever you have, So, and we do live, actually, I was listening to an interview with you and you said something about being fortunate to be a creative now because we have all these resources, whether it be, learning on the internet through YouTube or having DSLRs to be able to create with. I mean,
oh my God, yeah.
Those like the Sony cameras that they have right now they're pretty fucking good cameras.
Dude, I used an A7S for one of the pickup scenes in Stray, and I used a DSLR equivalent for a few specs that I did. And I'll use DSLRs like, well, not DSLRs anymore, but like you used to use helicopters to get aerial shots. Now you use drones, but some people use an Alta 8 to put a Red or an Epic or an Alexa, and sometimes you can use an Inspire. And the quality is so interchangeable these days that it's really like, what do you do with it? What do you do with the more accessible technology like that really catapults your voice or not? It's
for
like,
sure. Yeah.
It's like, all right, the tools are out there. Like, what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or even the lack of tools, that one film, Tangerine, got a lot of
iPhone.
press because of being shot on the iPhone 5, I think.
Dude, I shoot a lot of photos on iPhone these days, and like I have like I use a film emulation these days, and like I have photographer friends of mine that like ask me on Instagram, like, what film camera did you use? Like, what, like, did you use like a Fuji? And I'm like, no, dude, like that was my iPhone, And it's like, I'm not gonna profess that I'm a photographer, so I'm not going to use the iPhone to try and cannibalize the photo industry. But like, I think like now that iPhones are really good, you can shoot movies with them. You can shoot high quality images with them.
Sure.
Like, okay, now what do you do?
Yeah.
If you have that,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, that is just a lesson within itself with these cameras, like these phones. Getting much better cameras and much higher quality cameras. You can't really rely on the technology. You have to rely on what's in here in your brain to be able to utilize the technology to be able to help you create. You can't that's why a lot of, who knows within like 5 to 10 to 15 years if being a photographer is even going to be a viable career path. I saw that a couple of years ago, which is partially why I switched trajectories, but it's something that you need to really understand, like surveying the landscape, the technological landscape.
Well, I think it's like also being adaptable to the landscape too, and what new tech is coming out and how that can help hone your voice or express your voice. Like I'm definitely like no. I don't think it's gonna harm the photo industry at all. Like, because I think the same people were afraid of DSLRs harming the film industry the same way, Like, and you don't see any movies being shot on DSLRs like from a professional level. I think you saw like the 5D was used for like, like car cams in Iron Man, and that was like the highest level it got. Like I think you see people using DSLRs or cheaper cameras to get an opportunity to share their voice, and then get the opportunity to use better equipment.
For sure. Well, I think what I'm trying to say is with cameras being on phones as being so much more accessible,
Yeah.
it has changed the
game.
accessibility, and it's completely changed the game. I mean, I think there's a couple things there. It's like the change in commercialization as a whole, the
Yep.
change in the accessibility of information,
Right.
because everyone has a phone.
Access, yeah.
So yeah, everyone has access. So
Yeah.
I've just seen it as a photographer, when I was like a professional working photographer, change the industry, more so from the standpoint that you can't make any money shooting for a magazine, you know? And
Yeah.
that's how you would utilize the magazines to get the clients for like the commercial clients, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the structures definitely change. I see the commercial industry, like, you know, changing pretty greatly too, when it comes to, you know, trying to find young voices that are more impressionable to, because they can acquire the quality for a smaller crew, or like, you know, like I see commercials being shot by a director and a DP because,
Yeah.
you know, that trend of, you know, docu-style commercials was really hot. I think it's starting to die out right now. I think it's starting to like trend back to storytelling as like a conventional approach rather than like the montage-based commercial storytelling that we saw for quite a bit, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that just comes in waves.
Yeah.
So I think it's just being adaptable. And like, I think as long as you have like a voice that you're continuing to hone, you can adapt to whatever, you know, storytelling technique is currently in, I guess. Right.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think like, yeah, tech definitely, it screws the whole game up.
Yeah.
In a good, it has pros and cons, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it'll be a whole nother story when we're talking about artificial intelligence creating.
Oh my God. Yeah. I saw like, there's like a commercial that was made by an AI, like, you know,
Are you serious?
quantifying. Yeah. It was quantifying what story could be told in 60 seconds. And then the AI wrote the script, and then the people just went on and shot it, you know?
That's insane.
Yeah, I'm sure they would do that with a feature at some point, you know? Like, I mean, they're quantifying through data statistics, you know, that's how Netflix seems to work. What is quantifiable based on numbers,
Yeah.
you know? We'll pair this writer and this director together because they have data proven, and their genres could blend.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden a movie comes out, you know?
That is insane.
It's crazy.
How do you think we'll be affected by artificial intelligence?
What? Film? Oh, we will.
No, the human race.
Oh, I mean,
I'm sure you've thought about this.
but I would love to make a movie about it, you know, like, cause I think the moment you make a super intelligence that thinks faster and thinks ethically, then the human beings have taken a back seat in terms of being the highest thinkers, you know, and we have to find another way to find meaning, you know, if a higher intelligence is thinking faster, thinking more rationally, thinking more emotionally as well, because I'm sure AI will become an emotional intelligence, you know.
Yeah. Oh no, I know someone who works for a company that deals with artificial emotional intelligence.
Like, yeah, it's I mean, so there you go. Like, I think, you know, emotions are hard to quantify, but I think, you know, it's definitely something that is, I think, entirely plausible. So I think, you know,
Are you scared by it?
I mean, I'm fascinated by it. You know, I'm definitely, I definitely think that a human being is built to try and find purpose with whatever tools they have. So I think if they so happen we build something that is more intelligent than us, we're still going to try and find a way to be important. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if we're still around.
Yeah, we might be eradicated from the fucking planet, you know?
Yeah, that might be the natural evolution is.
And I have I had a film idea for that, you know, but I mean, that's another story, I guess.
Yeah.
I also think about the Neuralink, you know, the Elon Musk concept of connecting the mind to the computer. So every thought that you think is instantly channeled into a quantifiable, computer program, like you
code.
think something, the words come out,
I think that's like one step closer to uploading our consciousness to some sort of mainframe,
which I think is going to happen, or I think we're definitely attempting it. And I think like, I think we're attempting to augment the human being with technology. I mean, I think we do it every day. Like
exactly.
I'm so distracted by my phone, and I think, and as are everybody else, like, I think human beings and their relationship to technology is going to become really interesting.
Oh, for
it
sure.
already is. You know? And I think like we're just going to continue to get closer and closer, and the lines are going to blur until it's hard to understand what a human being is without technology.
Yeah, I mean, and it's happening slow. It's a slow progression. I mean, it's fast, but it's not something that. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
who knows?
What are
Who
they?
knows?
I mean, what do you think?
I'm more so tipping to the point where artificial intelligence will realize how much waste that humans create.
Yeah,
and so maybe artificial intelligence eradicates us to save the planet. Who knows?
I mean, I think that would be a rational thing to think. Like, if you see the amount of resources we use, the amount of resources that, a human creation would use, rather than us, like it would be, pretty easy to see what the weakest link is, So I think, I don't know. So going back to anime, I mean, I was always in love with the Animatrix because they talked about, the human robot struggle. And I think like I was so terrified by those, like, I think it was one of the episodes in the Animatrix that dealt with like the war of humans and robots. That was like the prologue to the Matrix. And I was just like, dude, this is possible. This is entirely plausible.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of the Animatrix, I mean, I was just thinking about the other day I was thinking about this while I was doing psychedelics. The Matrix, the film The Matrix. And I was just thinking, I was like, that film is way ahead of its time, but exactly on its time, if that makes any sense.
I'm going to back up and say that was actually one of my favorite movies. Of my list of favorite movies, that was probably
fucking movie.
Top 5. Yeah.
That's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
And I think Keanu Reeves is perfectly cast for that film.
That was his best. I mean, I do love him in John Wick, from like an endearing perspective.
Of course.
But like,
I mean, dude, he was perfect in John Wick.
He's Neo. Like he always will be,
Yeah.
And I love Mr. Robot for the same reasons. Like it kind of like dealt with that, perspective of, computer hacker turned hero, I guess, or anti-hero, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
Mr. Robot's amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
so many complex human emotions within that
series. I think like going back to also talking about Alien versus Aliens, like I think I love Black Mirror to death, but I prefer Mr. Robot slightly, or even The Matrix, because I think those characters had provided themselves the opportunity to overcome, their odds. I think Black Mirror, every character is just, they're fucked, And I think maybe that's my perspective on AI and humans, that humans, I have to believe, have an opportunity, or, our relationship to global warming, like we have to have an opportunity to overcome, because otherwise, it's a very bleak outcome, the other side.
Exactly. Yeah. That might be the difference between me and you, because I think you're more of an optimist than I am with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I play devil's advocate because I definitely recognize like the overwhelming possibility of just like catastrophic failure, and I'm just like, yeah, it's plausible, but I'd be curious to see if it was possible for anything to be a positive outcome, how it would come about. You know what I mean? Like what steps would it have to take to get there? What miraculous set of events would it take for us to figure it out?
I guess
and it might not happen.
Tell. And then we just look back at downtown LA and It'll be just Judgment Day and just a mushroom cloud.
Oh my God, it'll be Terminator Salvation,
Yeah, exactly.
which is not the outcome I want to see,
Yeah. Actually, the only reason why I watched Terminator Salvation is because me and Justin were talking about Christian Bale freaking out on set.
Oh yeah.
And then so I was like, oh, I have to just check it out.
Dude, he was
sick.
He was, from an artist perspective, he's definitely one of the actors I respect the most, though. I think he definitely
Dark Knight.
He challenges himself for the purpose of creating an authentic art. Even in these like genre films. Like he's always he's doing the most. He's trying to put the most he can.
Yeah,
which is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. I was gonna say I don't know how Christian Bale does it from a physical standpoint to go from The Machinist directly to, I think it was Batman Forever.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was the
Batman
first
Begins.
Batman. Yeah.
Not Batman Forever.
Yeah. That different guy.
Totally different guy.
Yeah.
Not George Clooney.
Yeah.
Christian Bale, Batman Begins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think he went from like 120 pounds to around 200 pounds or 190 or something like that.
I mean, he bulked up. And somewhere I feel like he has to be like truly dedicated to like, what does this character demand of me? Mm-hmm. Like, what does Batman demand of me versus what does the Machinist demand of me? Like, I feel like I'm just like projecting what I'm thinking he is thinking like, and that actually like, I'm just tangenting differently. How I think I used to think, and I think how young filmmakers think early on is a lot of like, I think like, what do I have to bring to the table that's unique? And I think a lot of that is ego based. And I think like, as you grow up as an artist, I feel like you start to like ideally like transition into like, okay, what is the story demand of me? Like I'm just a servant to the story or the art, like what can I bring to the table that can help the story move forward? And I think like you were talking about competitiveness, and I think that has been the most healthy way to look at being competitive of like, what can I do that can elevate this story as best as I can, and that's the best I can do,
Well, I think you're talking about just maturity as a creative as well, and understanding that it's not, yes, it is about you, because you have to understand and have the confidence to want to pursue something, to be able to say, yes, I have a unique perspective, and, and utilize whatever skills that you have to be able to create that. But at the same time,
it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about the audience that's going to watch it. It's about the people you're making it with. And like, they have to care about it, and the audience has to care about it. So like, if you just make something that like, I don't know. I think like it's tough to say like art is only one way, like for the audience or for the creator, But
yeah, exactly. But I think there's a way where it could be there's a balance where it could be both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to connect to you. Otherwise, like, why are you telling it?
Exactly. Yeah.
But hopefully it connects to the audience so that you share something that is relatable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that could be somewhat of a paradoxical sort of thought process, because it can be both ways.
I think had I had known consciously, that I love these parental-child relationships, with when I was going into Stray, instead of like subconsciously going into it from like a short form perspective. I think I can pull it off from a subconscious level, like of what I care about. But I think from a feature standpoint, because it is such a very literal translation of a story, because in 90 minutes and 3 acts, you have to communicate the story as effectively as possible, rather than a short. You can communicate more subliminally, I think. I think
it's more about a feeling.
It's more about a feeling. I think like a film, from a traditional storytelling standpoint, like I think if I had understood consciously that those are the themes that really strike me, then I might have brought different scenes to the table. Like I might have, I'm never going to say like go back and recreate a film, but maybe I would have dealt more with the mother and the daughter and what was their actual relationship before the mother was taken from the daughter. And I think, we deal in Stray in these like flashbacks of what did it, the daughter remembering what it was like to have her mother around in these flashing moments.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think in a short really works, but I think in a narrative that like is long form, I think knowing that was the theme consciously, maybe I would have dealt with that a little bit differently.
I see what you mean. Yeah, but I mean, you as a director see all the things that you could have done or should have done or whatever.
Yeah. And you take it into the next project.
Yeah, and that's all you can really do. I think it's good to be able to do a project, even if it's such a long endeavor to do this sort of project. I mean, a feature is like, it takes a couple years to actually have it go out there, right? Not including like all the visual effects work that you had to do. But I think it's just a healthy process of the mind just to be able to do a project and be able to have peace with that project and go on to the next one. It's just kind of like an acceptance of moving on.
It says you graduated and like you can't go back and take those classes, like you can take what you wanted to learn or what you did learn and just move on to the next one. I mean, that's the only way you grow. So I learned a lot on this feature. I think like just the stamina and the sharpness you have to have with each moment and being very clear with your story. I think it's a very different game than a short film. So I think that was a really powerful learning lesson.
And how much of appreciation do you have doing all those commercials and all those shorts prior to doing this feature?
I mean, it's like if I hadn't done short form as a career, like starting out and continue to do so right now, like I'm still learning on like, I mean, even on the last commercial I did, I learned a great deal of new techniques and honing skill sets that I think can apply to a movie that I do, So I think the way you interact with a crew, you can't pay for that. You learn that on set. You learn how to navigate creative voices and how to make sure different creative voices are all being heard and, kind of having the best creative ideas, even if it's not yours, rise to the top and empowering that idea as the director. That's your job, to empower the best idea and communicate it. And whether it is your baby or it's not, you're there to serve the story and communicate it to every department. And the way you handle yourself on set, like, and this is what I feel like I've learned, in just experiencing over and over being on set by getting to do commercial work and short form work, is that like, a lot of people think directors yell a lot to get stuff done, shit done. And
maybe that happened like 30 years ago.
Yeah, maybe that happened 30 years ago. I mean, it still happens today, but like, it's like every director communicates differently. And I realize like I definitely don't communicate by yelling or aggressively setting ultimatums. I definitely find that I'm getting the most creative work out of a team of people by doing the opposite, and I definitely don't think I would know that if I hadn't done like a lot of projects back to back. It's like writing and rewriting or painting and repainting. It's like you just keep figuring it out, more clarity on how you operate until like you're very self-aware of what works and what doesn't, And like, dude, I couldn't have learned that any other way because short form is so concuss. It's just like so back to back that like you are forced to learn at such a rapid pace what you're good at and what you need to learn. And you're given these like 1-2 day opportunities to try it again and try it again and try it again. It's like, I don't know, it's like boxing or like any other kind of, just get back in the ring, just do it, Like,
I know what you're talking about.
I just quoted Nike.
just get back. They didn't say just get back in the ring. But yeah. No, I totally know what you mean, man. I mean, I've learned a lot of that through martial arts.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to like, going into a directing ring, for instance, or like doing a project, like I definitely think like, I mean, what's great about doing more and more projects is that you get less stressed out about things that you can't control. When I first directed stuff like that had a lot of people involved, like I think my first short that I did with like 40 people, I was like stressed out every day because I didn't know what I couldn't control. You know, I think you just get better at knowing what's controllable and what's not controllable in, you know, within your grasp. And I also try to stay away from things that I think are just like unnecessary stress or unnecessary pressure. You know, it's like you're a rat in the maze. You touch the electricity long enough, you know, you decide not to do that again. You know, I do a lot of stuff that like, you know, like I don't do my own visual effects anymore unless I do it out of necessity because it is a unhealthy thing to do for one person to do that. You know, like I think on my feature, it was a very unhealthy thing to do. And I did it because I needed to, but, you know, you don't have to do that at a certain point, you know, and you don't have to kill yourself to prove something if there's a more efficient way to do it with other people.
Well, it sounds like you're figuring that out along the process and actually understanding that coming off your first feature is a good way to go into your next feature and, you know, figure out the next processes. Because, you know, there's certain things that you need to do because it's like a certain tacit knowledge, but then there's other things that you can just direct and delegate to people that can maybe do it better and more efficiently. And
oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, but the most important thing to take out of all of that is understanding that amount of grit. Going into the trenches and being like, okay, fuck it, I'm here. I'm gonna do it. This is the
this
option.
is what it is. Yeah,
it's the cards on the table. These are the cards I have on the table.
This is what you got to do.
This is what I got to do it. You know,
you got to bleed a little. It's like a rite of passage. You know. Yeah, I think like
I like that.
You just gotta
bleed a little.
You gotta bleed. Yeah, you got to. I mean, I think it's how you know you're still human. You know, like, oh, this hurt. Like, or, oh, this is what it took to do this. Okay. Like, well, I did it. Now let me reassess and reevaluate and like, know how to do it better next time. Like, I think like the best going back to the Terminator, like I loved that I think they did an interview saying, we didn't know that we couldn't do this movie, that we were too behind the times in terms of technology advancement to pull this movie off. But since we didn't know, we pulled it off, you know? And like, I just like, I think that's it's admirable. And I think like, you know, you have to challenge yourself and be ambitious and be like intentionally ambitious with like, okay, I'm going to push this bar a little bit. So like, because I don't think if they had pushed themselves on the Terminator, they wouldn't have gotten nearly as far, nearly as quickly as I think James Cameron has gotten with tech, you know? I mean, I saw Alita and like the way that they have gotten out of the uncanny valley, the eyes in CG characters is like, it was impressive. It's 2019, you know, like it's obviously like the Polar Express came out in 2004 or like whatever, you know, but like, yeah, it took time and they had to like make mistakes to figure it out. You got to make mistakes and like by just doing it. You know?
Almost embracing mistakes.
Oh my God. Dude,
but you have to learn from the mistakes. You can't just be
you can't do it again.
I'm constantly making mistakes. I'm just making mistakes. Fuck it. I knew I made the mistake, but you know, I'm just gonna keep on making them.
You got to know what the consequences are. Like you got to like learn that was a consequence. Okay, I know not to do that now, but now I know what is possible because now I know what is not possible. You know, I did my short in college was really ambitious. Like it was a moon movie. We built this full CG set or a full practical moon set. Then we did CG all around the set. And this was like my sophomore, junior year in college, like graduate theses weren't even doing this shit, you know? And like, and my school definitely acknowledged that it was very ambitious in the sense that they were very apprehensive to us pulling it off. We didn't know any better. Like that was actually my first set that I had 40 people on set, you know, and that was the set where I was stressing every single day, you know, and like I was freaking out and like I didn't know that I couldn't pull it off until we finished shooting it and realized that the train crashed into the station, you know, and it took, you know, we thought we would finish post in 2 months and I was going to do all the visual effects and it took 7 months to finish through, I think, all the realizing how much of an undertaking it was after the fact. And, you know, I learned a lot by making those mistakes. And I think that like makes you grow. But at the same time, I wholeheartedly embraced every mistake I made there, you know, because I think it taught me. And if I think you make your mistakes young, you got to make your mistakes young, because like if you make them when you're way older and there's money on the line, there's stakes on the line, there's like other people's jobs on the line, like that's not a place to make mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
Or that's a place where you have to make calculated mistakes, you know,
Exactly.
that you know what is possible outcome and what is the possible consequence, and everybody's fully willing to accept that risk, you know, rather than not knowing what the risks are at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, the stakes are higher too.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, assuming the stakes are higher as you get older. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, also just in terms of like life expectancy, you know, if you do something when you're 20 and you do something when you're 30, it's totally, you know, and practically a different person.
Dude, I mean, like if somebody thought to hand me $500,000 to make a movie when I was just graduating college, myself today would say, don't take that money and make it. Wait to make all the commercials and music videos first, because you're not going to know what to do with that money. And I would probably say the same thing today. Like, you know, if I were just so happened to be graced with, you know, a big budget film, like what are the tangible steps that I need to take to pull that off? Like, to be aware of that, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I see a lot of filmmakers make a jump, and some make it really gracefully, you know, like, and some pull it off. And I think you recognize that they have, if you look behind that, like they have built up a lot of experience. Like Chris Nolan did several films before the Batman films, you know, that like exponentially grow in scale. And like, and some people, you know, like just are very adaptable learners, so they can maybe move at a quicker pace, you know? But I think there is something to be said for a learning curve. Well,
I think you said it best before when we were talking, or you said something to the effect of understanding your strengths.
Yeah.
Well, I'll leave you with one last question.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for younger creatives that want to turn this into a career?
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about so many things that I think are applicable that I wish I had heard when I was a kid. Make mistakes is probably one of the biggest ones. Learning from your mistakes is a big one. I think making mistakes correlates to like challenging yourself to think about doing something that is a little bit beyond your reach. And so you try it out, you know what it feels like, and know what to do better the next time. I'm not going to say things like listen to your voice or find your voice. Like, I feel like that's all tangential. Like, I can't just say like, find your voice. 'Cause it's like, well, how do I find my voice? You know, like, I think you have to just find something you really want to do and just keep doing it. 'Cause then just by the practice of doing, you'll learn who you are better, I guess. So I don't know. I mean, we're figuring it out, you know, like
I'm constantly figuring out, man. I don't have shit figured out.
Yeah.
I'm figuring it out right now talking to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like, you know, this is, but also like you were saying before we started this, like asking questions too, like asking questions from people that like have a different perspective, like always asking questions, and not being too prideful to feel like that you don't have anything to learn, you know. Everybody always has something to learn. So,
for sure.
You know?
I mean, you do, assuming that just because you're older than someone that you might have more wisdom, or, you know, just you do a disservice to yourself not intaking information from different sorts of people, different types of people, younger, older. You can learn so much just from keeping an ear open and trying to understand, you know?
Yeah.
And it also makes you a much more empathetic person.
Yeah. I mean, if you act like know-it-all guy, like you're not a relatable guy. It's like, all right, this guy knows it all. Like, we don't have to talk anymore, you know? Like, that sucks, you know? Like, like I have so many people that are younger than me that like, the first reaction could be like, oh, you're intimidated. But it's like, no, like, they're a potential friend of yours to learn from, you know what I mean? And to like, to share back and forth. Like, I have younger director friends of mine that like are teaching me so much stuff, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's important.
Yeah. I think it's always good to be able to challenge your own perspective by surrounding yourself with all kinds of different type of people, but also understanding the people that you shouldn't hang out with too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
I mean, it's just negative personalities like that are not, that are, I think negativity comes from fear, right? Like fear of wanting to just go out and do it because it's scary to do something, you know? Like I think it's harder to create when you're surrounded by those kinds of personalities. And as much as you want to help every and anybody understand that there's really, the fear is not a driving force, you know, like that, you know, you don't have to be so afraid of something to the point in which you don't do it. But that's really, it's like, that's asking you to like try and be the person to change how somebody else thinks. You can't do that. So.
I think you were talking about before, it just, you know, even when you're directing on set, it's just accepting certain things that you can't change and certain things that are out of your control. Yeah. And just the whole idea of acceptance in general. And I mean, accepting people for who they are, you know, because it takes a long time for people to process certain things, to be able to change and like to really make a substantial change in your personality. You know, some make it sooner than others, but if there's something that's like highly ingrained within you, then it's hard to just change that overnight, you know?
I mean, I think like things that affect you very deeply as a child, both positively and negatively, I think like are entrenched in how you are and how you act. Like, I mean, going back to me being affected by parental child relationships, like part of why I think I'm affected most deeply by it is because I almost lost a parent as a child. And like, that was a very impressionable age for that to happen to somebody, you know? And like, I think ultimately like things worked out, but I think that forever, you know, I'll watch Finding Nemo and I'll burst into tears because like that the palpable like nature of like, okay, losing a parent, that's very real for me, you know? And I think I can't change that, you know, at this point. Like that's just become that was a part of my history, so that's part of my present, you know, and it's like, what do you do with that?
Exactly.
You know, that's positive, you know, or productive.
Yeah. Yeah, and dissecting those things and understanding what they mean for you. And it's interesting to use film as a metaphor for those things, and I guess that's why film is such a palatable medium, because it's in such a relatable medium in certain ways, because you can actually understand a lot of your own thought process through these certain films like Finding Nemo and any sort of film. It doesn't matter like if it's a cartoon, if it's an anime, if it's an action film, it's fiction, nonfiction, documentary. You know, you can, if you try to learn, there's so much to learn. Yeah,
I mean, if it's mainstream or abstract, like, I mean, everything is working to express some experience. You know what I mean? So I think like we were talking about horror versus like horror that has a character that can overcome. Like, I definitely like identify with characters that like are faced with like pretty obstructive status quos, you know, and like I like to identify with those characters too. And like, you know, so stories are ways of us sharing our perspective and hoping that people identify and relate so we can feel like we're not crazy, I guess, right?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, shit. Thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. No, this is great. I love talking about this stuff with people. Like, I don't know. I appreciate your perspective and like.
You too, man.
I feel like I've learned a lot. So.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot from you too, man.
Yeah. So, I didn't know you were in Muay Thai and, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, and so many things. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Cool.
Thanks.
It's dope, man.